Today, we're installing electronics for the Ford F-150 live valve kit. Please take a moment to read the safety guidelines. Begin by disconnecting the negative battery terminal. Now that the electrical system has been fully de-energized, let's move on to the vehicle's interior. We need to remove the rear seats. Start on the passenger side of the cab and unbolt the seatbelt anchor. Pull the loop on the side of the seat and flip them up to access the nuts underneath. Remove both of the front seat nuts and fold the seat back down. Now pull the latch behind the headrest and fold the back portion down. Remove the emergency vehicle jack and disconnect the electrical connections. Remove the nuts and fasten the rear seat to the cab floor. Now that the seat's free, tip it forward and remove it from the cab. Now, let's move around to the driver's side and unbolt the seatbelt anchor. Pull the loop, flip the seat up, and remove the nuts underneath. Now, fold down the seat and backrest together by pulling the latch so you can access the rear of the cab. This is much more difficult than it looks. Be patient and consult your manufacturer's guide if necessary. Disconnect the electrical connections and remove the nuts fastening the seat to the floor. Once you've removed the nut fastening the middle seatbelt, free the seatbelt from the seat and remove it from the cab. With the rear seats removed, we can proceed to mounting the IMU and ECU bracket. Please note that the F-150 cabs can vary slightly depending on model and trim package. You might have one or two pre-existing holes. In our case, the truck only had one pre-existing hole. Consult your manual and learn more about other mounting variations. Pull back the carpet against the rear cab and find the pre-existing threaded hole adjacent to the middle seatbelt stud. Align the bracket using the pre-existing hole and mark the bracket's second anchor point. Use a punch to further define the mark you made and drill a hole using a 17 32nd inch drill bit. Be careful when you're drilling the cab floor if you have a hybrid model. To prevent damaging any components underneath, use some tape to mark your drill bit. Don't let your drill bit go beyond 1.5 inches. With the hole drilled, use a vacuum to remove the metal chips and install the supplied riv nut. Bolt the bracket to the cab floor. If the bracket feels wobbly, apply the supplied double-sided adhesive tape to the underside of the bracket and re-secure the bracket to the floor. Place the middle seatbelt anchor over its stud and find the center line between the anchor and the bracket. Use a marker to draw a line. Then measure 1.5 inches down from the crease in the cab floor. This is where you'll drill a hole for your harness grommet. Mark the spot with a center punch and drill 1 1/8 inch hole. Remember to not drill too deep beyond the cab floor if you have a hybrid truck. Once the hole is drilled, vacuum up the metal chips and cut away some of the cab floor carpet to accommodate the bracket in your freshly drilled hole. Let's install the ECU and IMU on the bracket. Place a supplied standoff on each of the ECU studs. Install the ECU with its connector pointed toward the passenger side of the truck. Make sure the white cover on the IMU is pointed downward with the connector pointed to the back of the cab. Torque the nuts to 70 inch-pounds. You'll need to install the ECU's ground ring terminal on the rear passenger side ECU stud when you install the harness, so we'll leave that one loose for now. Next, modify the supplied harness grommet. Cut the grommet between the two ridges. You'll need to disassemble the fuse block so it can pass through the grommet. Lay your harness out on the ground and start pulling it through the grommet. Bundle RLC and RRC connectors and pull them through first. Next, pull the ignition fuse tab through, followed by the disassembled fuse block. The power and ground ring terminals are attached to the fuse block. Pull those through as well. Finally, pull the FLC and FRC connectors through the grommet. Install the 8-pin dust cap on the main harness branch labeled Sensor. Place the supplied 3-amp fuse into the upper fuse tab slot. Now, let's pass the harness through the cab floor. Start with the disassembled fuse block, then the rest of the connectors. You'll want approximately 2 feet of harness inside the cab. Now we need to tap into the F-150's CAN harness using our CAN sensor. Open up the sensor and study the cover. There's text indicating which side CAN high and CAN low should be routed to. Look for the 14-pin black connector underneath the driver footwell that's connected to the trailer module. The module has 2 connectors. We're disconnecting the connector that's closest to the passenger side of the vehicle. You'll need to remove 3 to 4 inches of fabric tape to expose the wires. Carefully identify pin number 6, the green wire with a blue stripe, and the 14-pin connector for CAN high. Next, identify pin number 7, the white wire with a blue stripe on the 14-pin connector for CAN low. Place these wires into the spots in the CAN sensor and reassemble the sensor. Make sure the wires are fully seated inside the foam to ensure the reader functions correctly. Plug the vehicle's harness back in and secure the CAN sensor to the vehicle harness with zip ties. We need to route a harness branch from the CAN sensor to the back of the cab. Install the 4-pin dust cap into the touch point branch. Start by removing the driver's side door sill trim. Now, plug your CAN sensor into the harness branch labeled CAN 2 VEH and start tucking the harness underneath the door sill trim. Once you've reached the B-pillar, remove the rear driver door sill trim and keep working rearward. Once the harness is in place underneath the door sill trim, secure the harness with zip ties. Reinstall the door sills on the driver's side. The only remaining branches you're using on this harness are labeled IMU and CAN. Give yourself about 2 feet of slack and bundle the rest of the excess harness together with zip ties. With the CAN sensor complete, let's connect the harnesses. Find the 2 branches labeled CAN and plug them in together. Plug the large 48-pin connector into the ECU. Next, plug the branch labeled IMU into the IMU and secure the harness branches together with zip ties. Let's fasten the ECU ground ring terminal to the ECU's rear passenger post. Torque the nut to 70 inch-pounds. With the harness fully connected in the cab, tuck the excess harness behind the carpet. Install the harness grommet into the cab floor. Now let's transition to the truck's underside. FLC and RLC go across the vehicle's crossmember towards the driver's side frame rail. Secure the harness branches frequently. Route the branches over the driver frame rail so that they're accessible in the rear wheel well. Using a snake might make the process easier. Connect RLC to the driver's side rear shock and secure the harness branch with zip ties. Next, route FLC up the driver's side frame rail towards the front of the truck. Loosely zip tie the branch to the frame rail. Once you've routed the branch into the front driver wheel well, connect FLC to the shock. Pull slack from the FLC rearward and bundle both FLC and RLC harnesses together and secure them to the frame rail. Next, route RRC to the passenger side frame rail, then to the passenger side rear wheel well. Connect the branch to the shock and secure the harness. Finally, route the last 3 branches towards the engine bay. These branches include FRC, power, and ignition. Once you've reached the wheel well, pull the power and ignition branches into the engine bay. Route FRC into the wheel well, feed the harness over the coil bucket and connect it to the shock. Secure the harness. Open the fuse box and cut a slot for the ignition fuse tap to pass through at the front of the box. Next, locate slot number 23. Remove either a 5 amp or a 10 amp micro 2 fuse from the slot. The fuse amperage will vary depending on your specific truck model. Place the micro 2 fuse into the lower fuse tap slot on the ignition branch. Install the ignition branch into slot F-56. Once complete, you can replace the cover on the fuse box. Use a punch to mark the sheet metal in the corner of the engine bay. This is where we're going to start to mount the 12-volt fuse block. Drill a 1/4 inch hole. Reassemble the fuse block and secure it into the engine bay. Connect both power ring terminals to the positive terminal of the battery. Next, connect the ground ring terminal to the negative terminal on the battery. Reconnect the battery's ground terminal. Let's reinstall the truck's rear seats, starting with the driver's side. Torque the nuts securing the seat and seatbelt fastener to manufacturer specifications. Then, reconnect the electrical harness. Next, reinstall the emergency jack that lives behind the passenger side rear seat. Reinstall the rear passenger seat. Torque the nuts securing the seat and seatbelt fastener to manufacturer specifications. Finally, reconnect the electrical harness. Look inside the cab and decide where you might want to mount your mode selector. For this vehicle, we've chosen to mount the mode selector on the dash. Once you've decided, assemble the ball mount and mode selector. Power on the mode selector. If the mode selector's LEDs aren't white and orange, proceed with the pairing procedure. To enter pairing mode, hold the left paddle down and the right paddle up for 3 seconds until the on-road icon flashes blue. Before proceeding, make sure your motor's been off for more than 1 minute and your foot is off the brake pedal. Starting from the off position, press the start-stop button 7 times to pair the mode selector. If your truck is keyed, follow the same cycling pattern. The on-road icon will quickly change colors and revert back to orange and white once paired with the ECU. Review the manual for additional details. Please note that the same pairing procedure must be followed to pair a smartphone to our mobile app. Scan the QR code to download our mobile app. Open the app and click Pair New. Select your vehicle once it appears. Now that you've installed your new live valve kit, it's time to go enjoy the truck.